We're back with another edition of Try to Disagree, where we discuss and debate a relevant triathlon topic.
Yeah, this week we are discussing and asking the question if Ironman needs qualifying standards. Will it be a barrier to entry, or will it simply make the sport safer, healthier, and more rewarding to those that complete it?
Qualifying standards. Basically, proving to race organizer that you're healthy, fit, and capable of completing the distance. It's a polarizing topic. In Ironman world, you've never had to prove to race organizers. You've never had to jump through any hoops. Anyone brave enough could literally just buy an entry to an Ironman.
Yeah, but in many other sports, like ultramarathon running, for instance, you can't enter the biggest and longest events without proving that you're capable of doing some shorter events first. Now, there are good arguments for both policies. So today we're going to discuss the positives and negatives around having qualifying standards and whether it might be time for us to see them in iron distance triathlon racing too. So first off, I'm actually going to take the for side of this, and my argument is quite simply it makes the sport safer. Now, unfortunately, we've seen a number of deaths in Ironman racing, particularly during this swim portion, and often these are attributed to physical ailments that I believe probably would have been noticed had they done a shorter event before having done the actual Ironman event, and have not unfortunately had such the consequence that they did.
Well, that is possible, but there are swim safety initiatives in place for almost all races, and there are contingencies for bad weather, etc., so that they shouldn't be sending athletes into dangerous conditions, and there should be enough lifeguards, etc. Rolling starts have been instituted in pretty much all Ironmans now, so that you don't have a mass of people swimming on top of each other. And of course, the sudden cardiac events that you're talking about are kind of prevalent just in the demographic that does Ironmans, and they're kind of unpredictable events. Just because they did a shorter event or 70.3 doesn't mean you would have noticed anything wrong. You can still see these things happening in Ironmans. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be any safer or prevent some of those deaths. Chances are you get through the shorter distance without ever knowing there was anything wrong and still see the same things happening in Ironman.
But even still, I do believe by having these qualifying standards, it also hopefully will reduce some of that risk to the actual event organisers. And as I said, a lot of ultra trail runs require you to do a qualifying race or a certain race of a certain distance to prepare the runners or the athletes for what they might expect should they then take on the next step, and potentially eliminate some of those people that may not want to take on or feel like they're ready for that. And in doing so, that prevents them from, in ultra runs, for instance, having to get the mountain rescue teams out to save some of those people that really weren't prepared. And I guess the same would be true in Ironman racing. They would need less medical staff out there and hopefully less consequences.
Yeah, and that does make sense for mountain races because they're in extreme places and it takes a mountain rescue team to get you. But Ironmans generally happen on roads, often closed roads and footpaths where it's easily accessible to any number of emergency vehicles. I mean, if someone needs to DNF, they're seldom going to need a mountain rescue to carry them home, or even an ambulance. Most of the time, they just need a sag wagon to get them back to the finish. They're gonna stop and they're gonna get into some difficulty because they weren't well prepared. Whereas, obviously, in a trail mountain run, if you realize 50 Ks in that you're not capable of doing this and you sit down, how are you going to get back? Whereas in an Ironman, if you realize halfway through that you're not capable of doing this, you can sit down until the sag wagon comes and you can sheepishly climb in the back.
So I think with ultra running, we're at this point where people still believe it's extreme, and whilst it is increasing in popularity, it's still people are going into it with the caution, knowing that it's quite extreme, and so we're not seeing maybe quite as many fatalities, hopefully, and we never will do. In Ironman racing, I mean, everyone used to get the Ironman tattoo, still do, but it's far more common, a lot of people doing Ironmans now, and so the prevalence of these fatalities or issues or medical issues is on the rise. And so whilst I agree with you, yes, they can access the athletes far easier, it is going up, and where do we draw the line? So I guess my next question to you is, thinking about this from both sides, if we do bring in safety measures and qualifying standards, do you think it actually would affect the sport in terms of the numbers? I mean, it's great. We've got a great community, a great size, people wanting to do all these events, but will it really reduce the number of people trying to do events anyway?
I'm not sure it will. I don't think it will. I think maybe people will be put off. It will be a barrier to entry initially. People will go, well, I wanted to do Roth and now I can't because I have to do a 70.3 before to prove that I can do it. So you know what? I'm just not going to do triathlon. And you could see that happening. I don't think it's a real problem. I don't think most people for example, let's talk about old Quinn who did Roth for our channel. That was his first ever triathlon. Against our advice, it must be said, we did encourage him to do a half before, but he didn't. And if we had said to him, well, you literally can't start unless you've done a half before, he would have definitely done it. And I don't think it would meant he doesn't do the half. So it'll be a barrier to entry. I think you might see a few less people, and we do want more people doing triathlon. So maybe, it will reduce numbers slightly. And I don't know, I'm on the fence on this one. I think that you could probably argue both ways and most people will still do it.
I think we're probably in slight agreement here. I think a majority of people, when they're going to do a full distance Ironman, they are doing a 70.3 or shorter distance before. And there's very few people that do just jump straight in there. And as you say, if you told them, you've got to go and do a full distance, I think a lot of them probably would. And if they don't, well, they probably weren't that committed in the first place anyway, so it's not the end of the world, right?
I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess we're kind of on the same page on that one.
It's not much of a try to disagree right now, then,
but it does add to the cost, though, doesn't it? Having to do an extra event, and triathlons are really expensive. Let's be honest, and forcing someone before they can go and tick an Ironman off and say that they are an Ironman to do another event that costs another £300 or more to enter, plus all the travel and everything else. That does start getting to the point where people go, actually, I'm going to do less, or I'm not going to do it at all, or maybe I'll never do it full. And that's not something we want to see. We don't want to see people being put off by, well, in order to do an Ironman, it costs X amount, plus you have to do a 70.3, plus you have to do a Olympic distance to qualify for the 70.3, and now you're talking about the entry fees for 3 events on top of all the bikes and kits and everything else. And that is a barrier to entry.
Yeah. And I agree with that. Yes, it will increase the costs. I was going to say marginally, probably not marginally. It's actually quite a bit, actually, isn't it? But as I say, a lot of people are doing that anyway. And for those people that maybe weren't planning on a qualifying event, I guess my argument here, or a good example, and you'll know this one very well, is the Comrades Marathon. They have like 20,000 people lining up there. I think that's the cap. They would probably have more if they could. Yeah. But a lot of people, I mean, the qualifying standard for that is to do a marathon prior to, and it's a time of 4 hours 50 or less. And I'd imagine, actually, a lot of these people are finishing a marathon being told, wow, you went sub 450, you could do Comrades Marathon. They're like, hang on, I wasn't actually thinking about doing that, but maybe I will now. So actually, the same is true in triathlon. Someone finished a 70.3 and then someone went to them after and, hey man, James, you can do an Ironman now.
But that's a reason to not have qualifying standards, not a reason to have it, because that is risky, that is dangerous, because there is no reason that someone who's finished a marathon in 4 hours 50 is in any way qualified to run the Comrades Marathon, which is more than twice the distance. Yeah, they have qualified to enter, and the race organizer can be, well, they have run, so they're a little bit safer, but they're not actually fit enough to do it. And similarly, for a triathlon, telling someone who crossed the finish line in a 70.3, you qualified to do an Ironman, implies that they are fit enough to do an Ironman, and that's not true. You've qualified now, you've ticked that box, so now the race organizer will say, yes, you can enter if you have a qualifying standard. But it doesn't mean that they are fit enough to do it, and it almost does the opposite, where a competitor might look at an Ironman and go, well, objectively, from our point of view, it's 3.8 Ks, 180 Ks, 42 Ks. I'm not sure I can do that. If someone then pats them on the back and says, well done for finishing half that distance, you've qualified, you might be saying, well, you've qualified to enter. They hear you have proved that you are strong enough to do it. and they go and enter, and you might actually get people who are less prepared and less ready and less qualified to do an Ironman entering, despite, contrary to what your whole goal of setting qualifying standards.
So what
was.
you're saying is you might eliminate some of those people through a screening process and go, oh, actually, hang on, I was thinking of doing an Ironman, but maybe I won't now. But then you've actually got others that are now intrigued by doing an Ironman and had no intention of doing one before,
and
simply
falsely
because
been led into doing an Ironman, and you're going to get more people who are less prepared and less people who have that barrier of cost or whatever it might be, hoops to jump through.
It is a good point, which I hadn't considered. So
does that mean I won this one?
I don't know. I still am. I mean, I still feel quite strongly about the Ironman distance, or just generally in triathlon, there is this, or endurance sport, there is this push for the next biggest, greatest, harder endurance challenge. And I'm a little bit concerned by that. And it's meaning that more people are just doing Ironmans for, I don't know, on a weekend activity. And people are now going for things that are bigger and further. Yeah. And so I'm slightly concerned by those that are getting drawn into doing an Ironman that maybe really aren't ready to. And also those that are even going for things that are crazier. And I'm put my hands up, I'm sort of sometimes doing stuff like that. And actually, we maybe need to be careful here.
I think potentially, and this was the opposite of my argument the whole way through, qualifying standards can kind of link all the distances together.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like there is a progression in this sport. Yeah. You should progress from a sprint to an Olympic, to a half, to a full. So then people see that as, well, this is the pathway to get to a full, as opposed to you can just enter one next weekend and jump into it.
Yeah, so the messaging needs to be clear, doesn't it, and controlled.
That's the problem, is the messaging can't be, you did a half, you are therefore ready to do a full. The messaging has to be, there is a process and you should tick one of the shorter ones off first before you tick the next distance off, before you tick the next distance off, and prepare for each in steps, as opposed to you could enter an Ironman next weekend if you want to, and off you go, as long as you got the money to pay for it. Because both of those are not very good things. So yeah, I think it can be a positive thing, but personally I'm against it, and I don't think we need to do qualifying standards.
The question's out to you guys. Let us know in the comment section down below what you think, whether we need qualifying standards for doing an iron distance triathlon event or not, or just general thoughts around that whole topic. Let us know in the comment section down below. Hope you've enjoyed another Try to Disagree. And if you have your own comments or your own topics that you think we should debate, also leave those down below this video or any of our videos, and we'll pick up that comments, and maybe we could be debating that next time Mark and I get together and get the boxing gloves on. Thanks for watching.